Thanks to fellow nerd Torrin Atkinson, who suggested that we do a review of short treks. We'll do that after this. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd. And very short treks is an idea that was promoted on Star Trek Day of 5 animated short treks that are in the style of the 60s era, late 60s, early 70s era Star Trek series, which was done by Filmation. And it's the 50th anniversary of that, which is the whole impetus behind it. Now, to give you just a little background on Filmation, they started in 1963 as a cartoon studio. Filmation is short for film animation. And they had their more popular cartoons. They were the first to put a DC series on television, The New Adventures of Superman. Interestingly, the voices on that were the same people that did the radio version of Superman. Bud Collyer, who you probably have never heard of unless you remember To Tell the Truth back in the old days. Bud Collyer was the voice of Superman and Clark Kent, and Jackson Beck, who you might recognize the voice of from the early Little Caesars Pizza commercials, was the voice of the announcer. And they did serious stories of Superman and Superboy later, and then Aquaman, Batman. They did the Archie show. In all of these things, they were not your usual kiddie cartoons. They weren't just joke fest. They were actually telling a story. Skyhawk's another one of my favorites during that time. It was basically just an animated adventure that for one reason or other would have been too expensive to do just on television, although the Batman series had been on with Adam West and Burt Ward before this, a couple of years before this. And so when they did theirs, they did a more serious one, actually, than the live-action TV series that preceded it. But I put all of that in just because what we see here in short treks, there are 2 of them I've seen, the Skin a Cat, which was their first one, and Holiday Party, which is the second one. They're going out each week until they have 5 of these done. Now, Skin a Cat is basically consistent with the animation style that they had then. And the animation style for television, generally speaking, was set by Hanna-Barbera in the early days of television cartoons. Early days of television, if they did cartoons at all, they did old theatrical cartoons like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse and things like this. And these were theatrical cartoons. They generally were animated at the speed of the film, somewhere between 18 and 24 frames per second. And therefore, they were Disney especially was very lifelike in their movement. Warner Brothers cartoons used a style of animation that allowed all of the characters to express attitude. But if you were making something for television at the time, it just was too expensive to do that level of animation. And so when the Flintstones, which was the first primetime television cartoon, came out, it was 5 frames per second. Considerably slower. They made up for it in over-the-top sound effects and things such as that. And in the case of Filmation, I'm not certain that they did even 5. Most of the time, there might be shown a shoulder movement, an eyebrow lift, an eye movement, a mouth movement, and that was about it. It was enough to kind of suggest that things were moving, but really wasn't a whole lot of movement in it. And so what we have here is that style. But Filmation made up for it by having usually a serious story, especially in the Trek shows, which were written by some of the regular writers, including D.C. Fontana. Some of the better ones written by her. But this is a way of doing a joke. In fact, I think this is what a lot of people were afraid that Lower Decks was going to be. that what you're going to do is you're going to have a cartoon and it's just going to be a gag. We're going to do a gag. And that's essentially what Skin a Cat was. Kirk says there's more than one way to skin a cat, and Lieutenant Maress is offended by this. And he said, I'm sorry about this. I didn't mean to offend. And then says something like kettle of fish. And then the fish guy is offended. And then don't get your panties in a knot. And then there's someone with a panty head. And it goes on. And it's humorous. But it's not Star Trek. And they admitted in the previews for it that this wasn't going to be canonical, and it certainly is not. And I found it interesting at first, before I saw it, that it wasn't just on Paramount Plus. It's not. It's on YouTube. And I think that if I were Paramount Plus and I saw what they came up with, I would have said, I want to see this. I mean, maybe you can put it on YouTube. Maybe it'd be okay. But we don't really want to take credit for this. Now, it surprises me now that they even promoted it. It's just a joke. It's just a cartoon joke. Let's make a Garfield comic. Might as well have been. You can use and they're playing on the idea that science fiction, so you can have different aliens that look different ways, and so you have the cat person, the fish person, and the panty person, and then on. And what they end up resolving it with also just kind of comes out of not quite left field, but things more that go for a joke rather than any kind of real story there. And what kind of story can you put in a short trek? Well, we've seen those. We've seen those, the live action short treks, where they make actually a nice, compelling story in just a few minutes. So I think all they're doing is playing here. And if you take it for that, it's okay. It's interesting to watch the animation style. They're pretty good with that. The characters are well drawn. The voicing is done very well. Ethan Peck plays Spock in both of these. There are, some of the actual characters voice their own characters in the second one in Holiday Party. But other than that, it's and Holiday Party just wasn't funny. I mean, the whole idea on Spock not knowing what humor is made it look to me like the people who did the cartoon didn't know what humor was either. So that's my thought on this. You may have a different one. You may think that this needs to go into the cabinet of curiosities with all the other Star Trek series, but I think that we should just take it for what it is. It's just somebody goofing off that managed to get some money to make some cartoons and then get them put on YouTube. So I'd like to know what you think. Put it in the comments below, and we'll go back to our more serious reviews as we have. Tomorrow will be, of course, Deep Space Nine. Wednesday will be the original series. We have Babylon 5 and Lower Decks on Friday. So until then, don't go far.